Hi, I'm Alec Ripperger, software engineer at Livefront, and it's important to be kind to your AI agent. Not just to hedge your bets against an eventual AI takeover, but because being kind, in this case, looks suspiciously like being a competent engineer. If you've used an agent for real work, you know the pattern. You ask for something, and what comes back almost works, but it's inconsistent, buggy, or fails to run, and you're stuck debugging the agent's output. I want to talk about how to improve the experience. 3 practices that help the agent catch more of its own mistakes before you have to. Agents are fundamentally iterative. You write, they run, they read the signal, and they adjust. The quality of what they produce depends less on a perfect first answer and more on the feedback loop around them. 3 principles: something to fail against, focused context, and a second opinion. All things you'd already do for your human teammates. First, give your agent something to fail against. You wouldn't hand off a project to a new hire with no linting, no type checking, and no tests. It'd be too brittle. They'd ship bugs they couldn't have known about in a codebase they couldn't yet read. Same with your agent. The agent runs commands and reads the output, and that feedback loop is where most of the quality comes from. Your job is to put clear, fast signals in front. Strongly typed languages are one of the best examples of how to accomplish this. Compiler agents are precise and machine-readable. If TypeScript says type number is not assignable to type string on line 47, that's basically a repair instruction. The agent fixes it without you explaining the bug. The same logic applies to linters and tests. Every automated check you add is another way for the agent to catch itself before you have to. So turn on strict mode, add the linter, keep the tests fast enough to run often. You're not just setting standards for human teammates anymore, you're creating feedback for your agent. Second, and perhaps most importantly, context is king. Let's talk about 3 ways we can manage context to improve the results we get from our agents. You wouldn't drop a new hire into a 2,000-line file mixing auth, logging, and business logic and ask for a small change. They'd have to read the whole thing just to find their bearings. Same with your agent. Agents read nearby code and copy the patterns they find. Single responsibility files let them load the relevant thing without dragging in the rest. You also wouldn't expect a new hire to figure out your team's conventions on their own. You point them to a README, an onboarding doc, or a style guide. Same with your agent. Put your stable project rules, your tech stack, your conventions, your never forget constraints in a Claude.md or agents.md file, so every new session starts with the right defaults. And you wouldn't keep dragging old conversations into new work. A coworker debugging a logging bug doesn't need yesterday's authentication discussion in their head. Same with your agent. Long conversations get noisy. Anthropic calls this context rot. As the context window fills up, old decisions and unrelated tasks start competing for attention. So use fresh sessions for fresh work. Clear the session between unrelated tasks. Compact when the session is still valuable, but getting long. Treat the context window like working memory, not an archive. Third, when you're reviewing your agent's work, you don't have to do it alone. A second model, one with different training, different blind spots, can surface things you might want to look at more closely. Models miss errors in their own outputs that they're much better at catching in someone else's. Asking the same model, "Are you sure?" isn't the same as a fresh perspective from a different model. For high-stakes changes, bring in a different model. If Claude wrote the code, ask GPT. If GPT wrote it, ask Claude. You don't need it for every change, but for anything going to production, anything security sensitive, or anything you're not fully confident in, run it past a second model that thinks differently. 3 practices, 1 idea. Improve the feedback loop. And you may have noticed, none of these are AI-specific tricks. They're the things you do with your human team. Fast feedback, clear context, code review. That's the actual point. AI doesn't require new engineering. It just makes the case for good engineering even stronger. So be kind to your agent. It turns out to look a lot like being kind to your team.